is up, everybody? Welcome back to another segment here on Let's Talk Dispatch on my YouTube channel, The Raspy Dispatcher. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do so. It does help. I'm just really excited about how this segment, Let's Talk Dispatch, has been turning out. I've been speaking to so many people, especially this week, getting an interview scheduled to get more content out to you guys. And it's just really been amazing. It's been a very fun process. And speaking of amazing, that's pretty much the middle name for my next guest here. Halcyon Frank is Director of Training and Development at the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, as well as a training consultant for the Dispatch Lab. Hello, thank you for jumping on today.
Excited.
Yeah. How's your day going?
Good. I'm actually in Florida at the global Denise Amber Lee headquarters. So
fancy. I like it.
Yeah, it's been a fun time.
I bet. How's the weather out there right now?
It is hot. It is really hot, and I am miserable when I go outside.
I just talked to Dominique from Hello 911, and she was out in Texas, and she was like, "It's 103 out here." I was like, I love the Bay Area. It's just perfect. Perfect hot and cold mixed breeze. I'll take it any day.
Yeah, it's great being here, but I could do it without the weather.
I totally get that for sure. So tell us a little bit about, your journey, how you got into public safety, the origin story, you will.
It's not that exciting, but I also don't know that I have like a good, nailed down a good origin story. I got into public safety by accident. So I had moved away from home to Memphis. I moved back and really just needed a job, but was kind of in a position that I could take a little more time to find something that maybe would be a little more long-term. Because at that point I had graduated college, had my degree. So kind of wanted something that maybe I could stay in a while versus just trying to find something. And I have a sister that was going to go into law enforcement. And so I saw a posting that just kind of said that, you'd be interacting with law enforcement officers, didn't put two and two together, and walked into the interview and I was like, oh, this is for dispatch. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing. So did the interview, apparently must have done really well, and got the job, actually took the Criticall, got through that, got through the background process, waited the 58 years it takes for them to do those things. And I got into it a month or two later, I think the total time was. And so I started there. I actually spent about a year and a half there, and originally kind of growing up in college, had the idea that maybe I wanted to save the babies. And so I went to work for Child Protective Services in Nebraska, in eastern Nebraska. And I found that a dispatch on Saturday night where like no one besides the people on the radio talking to me was definitely more of like my style. So I went back to the same agency and spent about another 3-ish years there. And then went from there to another one, a local county. And I've been there about 2.5 years now. So I think I'm at like 7, 8 total in the industry.
Very cool. It's funny that you say like you accidentally got into dispatch, because I feel like that's kind of like my story too. Like I gracefully stumbled. I had gotten these degrees, and I was at a point where right after college, I was still coaching basketball. So I looked for positions that were flexible with my coaching schedule. And I was a social worker. I worked with adults with developmental disabilities. So I did that for a good 5-6 years after college, and it was a really flexible schedule. Then I was coaching at a JC up in Sacramento. And at the end of that, I was like, I should probably like see what these degrees do. I should, maybe apply, maybe.
Yeah.
So I went for a few interviews, and dispatch was the first one that hit. And it was just one of those like, there's a lot. Like I didn't realize how complex, A, that this site existed really, and B, just how complex and all the things that dispatch really has their hands in, you know?
Yeah, I remember, like, I distinctly remember watching, like, is it like the emergency show growing up? The one with William Shatner,
Oh, yeah,
and then,
yeah, yeah,
Panic 911 on A&E, like, I watched every episode of that, I rewatched some of them, and it's crazy, though, that never did it occur to me when watching them, like, this is a real job that people do, how do I get into this job? I just thought it was a very dramatic, exciting show.
yeah.
And so it's interesting to me and also crazy how many people though I ask and they're like, oh, I started and, I just did it, was going to do it, in between some things, or I just needed a job. And, 20 years later, I'm still here. Or how many people have like, they started it and did like me and they were like, I want to do something else. So they leave and then you end up back.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a job that can pull you in.
Yeah, definitely. So when you kind of first started, right, you go into the interview and you're like, oh, it's dispatch, that's what I'm interviewing for.
Yeah.
And so then you get into training, like how was that? Like, not now, obviously you're prepared now because you know what you interviewed for, but kind of like
Yeah.
not really going for that job in your mind, and then you get there, you're like, oh, this is it, and they offer it to you, you're like, well, I'm in it. Like, how was
Yeah.
that first stab at it, you know?
I did okay. I'm a type A perfectionist by nature. So like whatever I'm doing, I want to be good at it. Like doesn't matter.
Like,
Um,
it's a common dispatch trend.
yeah.
Common dispatch trend.
So, I made my way through. It's funny to me now, because it almost was like a you don't know what you have till it's gone, or you don't appreciate certain things. Because I have officers who I'm close with who will tell me, when you dispatched before you left, you did pretty good, but like when you came back, you just came back with like this passion. And so it definitely was a difference in there. But training overall wasn't like it wasn't super hard for me in the sense that, like I said, I'm a perfectionist, so I always work. It's definitely one of the things like that I learned in training and when I training people and in general is just it's a job that there's just such a constant feedback loop that I haven't necessarily seen in other jobs. Like you are always getting feedback, whether it's from people in the radio or callers or your trainer or like a supervisor. It's just instant all the time. And it's not something that you have in other jobs as much, I think. And so that can kind of be an adjustment for all of us.
Oh, exactly. And like I just lateraled to another agency. So I had to go through training again. And there was a lot of like imposter syndrome that I had to like
Yes.
combat because I went from a larger agency to a smaller agency. So I had these fundamental skills. Obviously, I've been doing the job for X amount of years, but then I had to do it. I had to find a different style, different way of doing it. And things that weren't important at the larger agency. For example, I had like 10 call takers at my last agency. In here, if I'm lucky, I have two other ones besides myself. So I have to learn to throw people on hold quicker. Whereas in my last agency, I had a little more time to like, someone gonna grab that, oh,
Right.
and then throw it on hold. Here it's like, hold on, please hold. Like so
Yeah.
just learning these little things and receiving that constant feedback even when you're entry level, you do have to kind of have that strong will going in, knowing like the feedback should be constructive. Like it shouldn't be harmful, it shouldn't be mean. Um, like you have to get this feedback during training because when you're solo, you're not
Yeah.
going to be getting that kind of feedback constantly anymore.
It's too late then.
Exactly. So then, but it is hard because it's the most unique job out there because it is that, and your training could be anywhere from, I think my training lasted almost 18 months because of how they set it up.
Yeah. My first agency, and some people would be like, oh my gosh. My first agency, I was there 3 months before I was on a shift by myself, completely solo.
Yeah.
And because of what we did, it wasn't as crazy just because like the demands and stuff as maybe like a huge center or the second agency, I think it was also a couple months, but that was more because kind of like I said, I brought in the fundamental skills. So it was more of learning just kind of their nuances. But for anybody who's switching agencies, like I will say from my own experience, don't put the extra pressure on yourself. Like I think I drove myself almost crazy because I came in and I felt like people were looking at me to like kind of know everything already because I came in with experience. And I definitely wanted them to know that I was competent in the job and I knew how to dispatch. But I also think I put a lot on myself and kind of the imposter syndrome and like stressed myself out instead of just being like, just do what you know, ask questions, get the feedback, and that kind of thing. Cause yeah, we don't need any more stress on ourselves.
That's so true, because that's a conversation I've literally had to have with myself. Is like, no, you're a good dispatcher, you can do this job, and you have this hopefully rare opportunity that, I have no intention of going through training again.
Right.
To relearn this job from people who have been doing other people. Like I always learned, even sitting in a pod with a coworker, like hearing them ask a question, and I'm like, oh, I could ask it that way. Like that's a good
Yeah.
way to ask that question. Like, so I'm always, and you will always be constantly learning from people in this job if you open yourself up to it. But training, retraining is this just special opportunity if you can get over the
Yeah.
pride. I don't know if that's the right
Yeah.
word, but if
Kind
you
of like
get past that and
ego
just
and
learn and let yourself be a sponge, it can be a
yeah.
really rewarding process.
Yeah. And that was one thing I always like to give my second agency credit for because they were very much open in a lot of ways to the experience I did bring. And so, I tried not to be that person. I don't know, like if you remember on the Magic School Bus where they're like, at my old school,
Oh yeah.
I never wanted to be the person like at my old agency.
Yeah.
And so I explained to them early on, I said, okay, if I say like, well, at, this agency, we did XYZ, I'm not saying it to compare. I'm saying it like in my head, I have to kind of like connect, like, okay, we did this, but now here we're doing this. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
I was like, I
exactly.
don't want you guys to think that I'm like, oh, well, let's do it this way. That's how no, I'm just kind of helping myself connect the dots. But if there was something where I was like, oh, like this is how we did it, it kind of seemed like it might be easier. Definitely had people who were open to it, which was really, it's nice and it's encouraging. Like you feel really welcomed when people kind of recognize that they also can learn, from new people, whether that's new lateral types or new fresh people who haven't dispatched before.
Yeah. And I was very lucky coming into my new agency. We use the same CAD system.
Oh, nice.
So I only had to like learn like different short keys and stuff like that, what they're using to string things together. So I was really lucky in that sense. So I had moments where I had to be like, okay, in SAC we did, D, here we do DE. And I had to verbalize that and like, okay, and tell them like in SAC we did this. And then so I've had that same conversation too, where it's like, I'm not trying to like I'm with y'all. I'm team new agency, but I gotta like unlearn, my old stuff and replace it with the new. So it's definitely a process.
Yeah. Sometimes training as a lateral can almost be harder because you like unlearn to learn. So it's an interesting experience.
It really is. There's definitely a few group chats where I was like, I can't do this. I'm coming back.
Right. I don't like it.
Like, I know your staffing is still bad. I'm coming back. You'll take me.
Right. Yeah, like, I know you'll take me back.
Do you remember any of your early calls, like when you were first getting into it? Any interesting calls you took right off the bat?
Yeah, I always tell people I forget everything, like literally everything, good, bad.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
Until somebody brings up a story and I go, oh, I remember. Like I do, and some of that I remember, I can't even tell you like how early on they were. But I'm just like, I am a law enforcement dispatcher at heart. So the excitement of law enforcement, the fluidity of the calls, how things change, any stories I probably like could think up in the next couple of minutes are all just going to be stuff that are based then on like significant incidents or like funny stuff with that. Like just and kind of just messing with my coworkers. At one point, kind of mid time, I think at my first agency was when Pokemon Go was big. So we always had like, these suspicious vehicle calls, and then they'd clear and be like, they're just playing Pokemon Go. And you're like, of course they are.
That's funny.
So
I always
stick out.
I always tell people, they're like, oh, like because I'm like that. I'm very much can't remember my calls. Nothing's really stuck. The way people talk about like a big call sticking with them. I'm fortunate to not have had that occur yet. But the one takeaway that I tell people about my job and what I do, I'm like, there are a lot more naked people in the world than we in our cities than we recognize.
I tell people like, if they're like, what's the, the worst call or whatever, I'm like, oh, I don't know. But like, I will tell you, people stick a lot of things up their butt, like more than I would have ever anticipated. People are they're strange and not like just strange. Like you don't, I think it was, I don't even remember like how the call came in, but like it was a guy who lit his shoe on fire in a parking lot. That was it. That was the call. There was like no backstory. There was no like anything. And you're just like, I don't understand. Like lit a shoe on fire. And you're like, that's it. And that's it.
Like, what did that shoe do to you, sir? What?
Yeah. Not how I spend my Thursday nights, but no judgment. You do you.
No judgment at all. I dispatch law enforcement as well. I don't have any wants or dreams of dispatching medical.
I do enjoy it.
I do think it sounds challenging. And having to stick to screens rather than being able to, free fall it and figure out where we're going. That's something I do not enjoy. But, sometimes when I know it's just straight medical, I'll hang on to that line a little bit and listen in. And there are quite interesting.
It's hard not to be a little nosy because you just hear like certain words, or like if you work with somebody else and you hear them say certain things on the phone. I think in this career, you just kind of develop like a certain ear, whether it's funny stuff or serious stuff, that when your coworker says that, you're like, what? Like your ears just perk up and you're like,
there is no other job where you can come back from the restroom and like hear a coworker going, okay, are his pants still off? And you're like, that tracks, like.
Yeah. I took a 911 just open line. And so of course, like I'm talking, see if somebody will answer, and listening to the background noise. And it just sounds like people are having a conversation. And at that point, like I've listened for a little bit to know that it doesn't sound like there's anything going on. And then he starts talking about taking his pants off. And I'm like, I'm going to hang up now. Like, I've listened. We're good. Yeah.
One of my favorite open lines that I ever got was, it was this male and it was this guy and a girl, and they were in an argument. It didn't sound physical. It just sounded like they were going through some things. And it was actually a 4th of July weekend that I was working a few years back, because it just like showed up on like my history of like things that happened to me that I make note of. And they were talking, and he was basically like, I don't steal from you, this and that. He goes, I mean, I steal from Target, but that's a corporation. That's different. I was like,
it is.
I mean, you are not wrong, sir. Like that's a valid point. You might win this one. Like, that's a corporation. It doesn't count.
Yeah, they got money.
The insurance, right? I don't know. Like, I don't know how that works, but Yeah, he was
It's
adamant. It's not the same.
it's true. I had one. It's just interesting. The at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and it's a small agency. So it's just me. I don't have a supervisor on, which really isn't that unique, especially in the overnight hours for smaller end agencies to not have like a supervisor on.
True.
And so I get a call, and this guy is like threatening me with lawsuits because my supervisor is not available to speak with him. And so I'm still waiting for that paperwork. I haven't been served yet. So been
Dear
like
sir,
4
we're
years.
waiting.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know if like I moved, so I don't know, maybe I lost in the mail. But yeah, I haven't seen that paperwork come through yet.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, and I do always find it interesting at how like at 3 in the morning people will call like, hey, I just want to talk to the officer about my case from 10 years ago. Are they working? And you're like, not even for this agency anymore.
Yeah, right.
It's
You're
three in the
retired.
morning. Like what made you call right now for
Right.
this, expecting people to be available to assist you?
Yeah.
Like, I'm down for following it up on the paperwork, totally, but 3 in the morning, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you up?
Well, and that's what it too, like I love about this job. And you can get it in other jobs too, but because kind of a unique environment with public safety, and like other jobs, like if you work in healthcare, you kind of have your unique thing. The people you work with then, like these just become like jokes, and like you just laugh about it then. And I still have officers that I don't work with anymore, but like I can text about like certain things and we'll still laugh because it's just so memorable, and you create them, especially like if you work a lot with the same people, then you develop those relationships. So that's one of my other favorite things too, with the funny calls, is that
Yeah.
you have people who also get to laugh with you, because it's funny when you're by yourself, but then I feel like we've all probably done the like, come listen to this, come listen to this.
Yeah. Definitely. For sure. For sure.
Hilarious.
So you're kind of a couple months into a new adventure
And
with the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. Want to talk a little bit about that? How you got
still
involved
here.
with them?
Made it 2 months. We're going strong.
Hey, yeah.
So probably a year or two ago now, I really got connected to, became friends with Nathan Lee, who's the founder of the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, that he launched after his late wife was kidnapped, raped, and murdered by a stranger. During that time, there were calls placed to 911. One specifically was not handled correctly, which had the dispatch center done things differently. It's very likely, you never want to say for sure, but very, very likely that Denise would still be with us today. So I love how it started from a place of, instead of being like, I hate you, 911, coming from a place of, I want to make sure this never happens again to anybody's family. And so I'm going to do what I can to help the industry. Because as we all know, not a lot of people know about 911. So it even helps in the sense that now more people know because of her story and because he brought light to the work that 911 does, and also helping to get more training and resources to the industry. So that happened in 2008, as formed, I think, officially like 2010. Hopefully he doesn't see this and he's like, really? I gave you a job. Not good at dates. So got connected to them a year or so ago, became good friends, became an instructor for the foundation, just teaching classes that agencies can book. And then just kind of through conversations, people are like, how'd you get your job? And I'm like, that's a great question. I'm not really sure. Conversations and what I was doing with the dispatch lab and on my own, just kind of felt like it would be a good fit. And, one of their main things is to provide training. So marrying my skills and kind of their platform and coming together and creating the training and more resources for centers is kind of just how we got here. So came on officially May 1st, and it's just been like a whirlwind ever since. It's just such a good organization. Like I said, it's just even from the beginnings of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I am still like, I don't even know like how I got to this point. And I'm so excited to be here that I'm like, I don't know what I did right, but
Mm-hmm.
I did it.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I've been exploring. My platform does help a lot of folks who are trying to get into this career, but as someone who's been in it for X amount of time and someone who can't turn their brain off and always thinking of what the next thing is,
Same.
the more I'm connecting with folks, the more I'm seeing life after dispatch. And I think it's important to talk about that as well, especially for dispatchers who are feeling burnout, feeling kind of at the end of, their career, whether they're 10 years in, 5 years in, or 20 years in. Um, it might be time for them to go, but they don't know what's next. And that kind of keeps them there for longer than they should be. And I think people talking about how they form these connections and get these opportunities, like the Denise Amber Lee Foundation has gotten you, um, it shows there's a life after dispatch, and we can connect with these private sector-ish companies and get into something and still have that connection to law enforcement, first responder, and helping people.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do kind of if I left the public safety sphere, because like I said, I even left it for like 10 months to go to CPS, and even that was kind of weird. I just felt my original bachelor's degree is in business management sociology because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life.
Mm-hmm.
So then when
I was a little social there. I was a little social.
I was like, one major is not enough. Let's throw in a second one.
Let's do two.
Diversify. And so when I got into dispatch, I actually kind of at the same time was like, I work night shift, lower call volume. This is a good time to go back to school. I can do it at work. And so I started that, and I got about halfway through working towards an elementary education degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had started doing more training in dispatch and getting into that more. And I just kind of had like a chat with myself, and I was like, we're not leaving dispatch. Let's just be honest. So I was able to switch that over to a degree in business development training, or HR business training and development.
Okay.
Without having to like add more time. So I have a second bachelor's degree because why not? It's just debt. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I have 2 master's degrees. I feel you, girl.
Yeah, it's just a number. So then I really started to develop it more. One thing I know I've told people before, but it's not about it's not that you're going to leave your agency or you're trying to get away from them, or like, I never want agencies to be like, why are you telling our people this? But thinking about life after dispatch and thinking about, what can you do in your center that's going to be like a resume builder, if you will. So that way, when you get to a point you don't want to be in dispatch anymore, that you have a resume built, and you have some of those other skills you can rely on. You show that you've taken on more responsibility. And that's kind of stuff you can even start like from the beginning, because so many people come into this career with other job experience. Mm-hmm. So kind of once you get over that initial training hump, you can, definitely find different things to be involved in that, later on down the road are really good to build that experience. And I'm just also a really big believer in self-development and always learning. And again, part of a team in a comm center for sure. But at the end of the day, to an extent, no one will look out for you like you will. So just setting yourself up to that way, to make sure if you get to a point of burnout or kind of to where you feel the end of your career in the center is, you have that stuff that can help you move beyond it.
Yeah. And one thing that I talk about a lot with this job is it's a good entry level job. Like you said, work nights, because most folks who get in are going to get stuck on graveyard unless their center is switched up for some reason. But most people end up on graveyard their first couple swings. And, you can do the online school. You can do, the hybrid and get your degree while making good money, while making good benefits. And,
some agencies will help pay. Like if it's related, always check with your agency.
There's a lot of education reimbursement. So I just think if we get people knowledgeable about this career, we can drop dispatch shortages, of course, right? First and foremost. But if it is something that you want to end up being a stepping stone, you can make good money and pursue other things while dispatching, and get a very unique set of skills. I'm probably going to always repeat this during these things, is one of my teachers in my academy was like, once you're a dispatcher, you can do anything. You have such a unique set of skills that you can market your ability to multitask, manage crisis, customer service. I mean, you can really spin it a lot of great ways.
Yeah.
You're so marketable. But if we get people into the field early, young, they can, build good retirement, build generational wealth, get education, all while being dispatchers. Like, I think I would have gotten to this a lot sooner if I had really known about it,
Yeah, I think we kind of silo ourselves because it is a unique role. And so we see it as like a very kind of unique thing. And we don't think about how those skills are transferable. And especially kind of going the other way. Just a recent post, someone was like, hey, I want to get into dispatching. Like, what kind of training should I take? Customer service. Because no matter what job you're in, if you interact with people, you have to know how to talk to them. And so customer service, like I started out in banking. And so customer service is going to look a little different. But me talking to somebody who's really upset about that they think the bank did something with their money isn't that much of a leap to talk to somebody who's really upset about something their neighbor did. A lot of my techniques are going to be the same across the board. So it's also thundering here. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's fine.
But
you're just bringing the thunder. That's all that is.
But those kind of transferable skills, like thinking about it, the typing, the customer service, it really, so if you do get out of it, like really like drill down and think like of all the things you've done, because even we get stuck in like, I came to work and I dispatched and I took the calls. Okay. But yeah, what you did de-escalation, you did data entry. If you're in a leadership position, you did supervisory tasks, you maybe did some organizational stuff. If you're doing any kind of record keeping, if you're doing quality assurance, all these things are skills that you can kind of add to your toolbox. No matter where you go, there's potential that you're going to use them. It's I'm like just really pro skill building and like really coming into your own and like mastering the craft, even like recognizing that everybody's like nerding out about dispatch like I do. You're going to do it really well. Learn the skills. And even if you're like, hey, in 2 years, I think I'm going to be out of here, like work your butt off in that 2 years to be really good at your job. Because I feel like that's only going to help you down the line. And it may not exactly translate or give you instant results. But at the same time, the relationships you build, the network you create, the reputation you make for yourself, especially I think if you are somebody younger starting out your career, because I can't like tell you how many people have helped me get to where I am just because of me working with them in some form or fashion. And, the reputation I set or the expectations and standards that they know I uphold with my work and that kind of thing. So that's kind of my rant on that topic.
I agree. I have so many people have, made my transition into dispatch a positive one. And I think if I had experienced a negative coming into dispatch, maybe it wouldn't be the same fire. And I think us as dispatchers, trainers, supervisors, etc., we have an obligation, and when we're trying to get people in the door, of providing a good experience, because the job's hard enough. We don't need to tap on anything extra because it's already stressful. Training's already long. It already took 400 years for me to even get the start date. So,
right. Exactly.
All those things are already valid. We have to be really responsible for the culture in our centers, the vibes in our centers, how our trainees are feeling during training, and creating that positive environment. So when they come through it, and there will be hard days, but when they come through it, they're not bitter or feeling a type of way about their experience during training because of their trainer or, their supervisor or anything like that.
Yeah. And it just reminds me, kind of like off topic, but one thing too, for anybody who's getting into it or like might be starting it, one thing I always tell my trainees is, and I don't really have them, I'm still in the center actually, like every so often, which I really enjoy. So you probably have to like drag me out of there. But like when I was full-time training, I would let them know it is kind of a different job. So it's not going to be for everybody, and that's okay. And you can love the job and not be able to do it. And that's okay. I'm not going to think anything less of you. It doesn't mean that you failed. So if you get into it and you find like, yeah, I love it, but I can't do it, or like, this is not sustainable for me long-term for whatever reason, I would always let them know, I would rather you come to that conclusion on your own than make me or like the admin have to make that decision for you. Because sometimes I think people come in and there is kind of this feeling of like, if I don't make it through training, if I don't get this, then I'm a failure. And, like I'm not good and these people are going to look at me. And I'm like, no, I recognize that it takes forever to get the job. And then it's very stressful to get through training. And then it's kind of a different set of stress when you actually get out to it, like on the floor by yourself. So I 110% will support you no matter what your decision is, but I rather you make that decision than leave it up to me based on your performance and those kind of things that have to make that decision for you.
Mm-hmm. I think definitely one of the things that I try to talk about is giving people like the realities of the job. It's a different job. It's shift work. It's 12-hour shifts. It's 365 days. We don't have holidays. Your schedule when you're training is going to be all over the freaking place. And really, like, it's not a job where it's like, oh, I'll say yes, and then I'll get here, and they're going to have to change to accommodate me. It's not that. It's not. So if you think it's going to be that, 9 times out of 10, it's not. So just having a real big understanding of like what your life is going to look like for 12, 6 to 18 months, depending on how long your training is, being honest that that's going to connect with your current lifestyle, your childcare, your, whatever you got going on at home, because it does really take a commitment to being flexible for X amount of time in the beginning. And a lot of people I've experienced have been like, oh, they'll adjust for me. And it is not that they don't want to,
right?
It's that they can't, it's just not the way the job works. So having that conversation with yourself as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the things too, I think our industry as a whole is kind of coming up against, because we're moving into this one, all the arguments about working from home and not working from home, like for other companies, and companies that say, no, you need to be in the office. Some say, no, you can be at home. And kind of that's all going on in the world around us. But it's not necessarily plausible for us. There's people who are trying different stuff, but if there is a way that works, it's not going to be that way tomorrow by any chance. So recognizing that we do kind of come into the game with that drawback, if you will, for some people. Some people are like, I couldn't work from home. I like need to be in it.
I could not dispatch in my pajamas. I would not be able to.
Yeah, I would be very unfocused. But so kind of recognizing that, acknowledging that, but also there's rewards that you get in this job that you're not going to find in those work from home jobs. You're not going to get the same stories. I guarantee you that. You're not going to get a bunch of stories about people sticking stuff out their butt working from home, unless like it's you sticking stuff up your butt. Like, I don't think you're telling those stories at the bar. So
at least not for free. Some things you got charged for.
Right. So there are like, I think sometimes us too, as agencies, if we can help kind of find those trade-offs of like, yeah, this might seem like a drawback for some, but there's definitely stuff that's offer. And like, if you're on 12 hours, the one I work for, I feel like it's called different stuff, like the Panama. So you have every other weekend off. And we found that has kind of helped a little bit. So that way we can at least tell new people coming in, like, shift work, 12 hours, but you'll have every other weekend off when you're out of training. And that's really nice.
It is. We do 12s with every other Sunday off. So we get 4 days off every other week. And that fourth day, oh, amazing.
For night shift?
Yeah, for night shift.
World of difference.
Oh, and when I do have to work that extra day and only get 3 days off, it's an 8-hour day. Because it's a rotating day. So it's like, I only got to come up for 8 hours? That's nothing, you know?
Like 8 hours feels like nothing. If you're used to working 12, you're like, I only got to pack like 3 snacks. I'm barely here.
If I can tap 14-hour days onto my regular work day, I'm cool. Like, that works for me. I'm like, I'll take those extra 2 hours on a work day. I'll do it. But so
there's definitely so much kind of stuff as an industry too. But there's just so much you can get out of this job. If some of it you got to find on your own, but there's so much to pull from it. I started in training for a private company that did like plasma as a plasma bank. So they sold that for medications, and wasn't really prepared at that time, but it kind of gave me like a taste, and I really kind of like felt like I liked it. So when I got to my other agency, or my first agency, I should say, kind of became a trainer by default. But gave me the opportunity to get into it and designing training stuff and deepening my understanding of training, and then getting the degree. And then my second agency, again, all the credit to them, because they really kind of let me just test some stuff and revamp their training program, and got to get experience that way. And stuff that kind of then I had to initiate, but I would not be where I am if I didn't like take those steps. And so in the thick of it, revamping a training program was a labor of love and terrible. And I would prefer to never do it again. On the other hand, it has given me so much to like carry forward and pull from. And then I joke too, because at one point we're a small agency, so we were getting consoles from another agency that was moving locations and upgrading. But, money is tight. So we were the ones responsible for putting the consoles together. And so now I joke, like, I can add console installation to my resume because I have put together integrated consoles.
Just put your IT. I think that fully covers it.
We reconnected wires. I don't even, to this day, I don't know if we did it right, but stuff works. So, but little stuff like that, awesome. Like you just gain so many skills from. There's, and depending on the size of your agency and stuff, like I taught a class last month, and the gal, I'm like, what's your favorite kind of part of the job? And she's like, I really love entering protection orders. And I was like, that's weird. Okay.
I dislike it greatly.
Not a fan. But it's just one of those things, like the job, like, okay, so if you love that stuff, you can kind of go that way. If you love the tech part, you can kind of go that way. If you love the talking to people part, you answer the calls, you love the dispatch, you can kind of go that way and strike those skills. So there's a lot of like different avenues. I don't know if this is the way you intended the conversation to go, but
this works for me. This is great.
Like, talk on this stuff all day.
This is all about chatting and tangents. That's all it's about. It works wonderfully. Because went from my bigger agency to the smaller agency, and I just realized how much more dispatch does. Like at my bigger agency, we had records, we had warrants channel, we didn't enter EPOs, we didn't enter anything really into the CLETs and NCIC and all that. Like we didn't touch that at my larger agency. And I guess it's my smaller agency, and they're like, all right, we're going to enter an EPO. And I'm like, oh, that's our job? Like, there's no one else to do that? That's us? Like, oh no, it's us. Enter skull-ins, enter plates, enter missing, enter like all these things that I just never dealt with at my larger agency. I'm now doing. And it just goes to show how different the job looks everywhere, like.
And I think sometimes there's like, people can get kind of like a distaste for different size centers because you feel like, oh, you don't know how we do it because maybe we're a big center and you're a small center. And we have to remember that like we're first of all, we're doing the same main job. So like we're on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, like, yeah, you may be really good at handling shootings and significant incidents because they're handling on a much more frequent basis. But do you know how to enter a stolen vehicle? Maybe not, because you don't do that in your dispatch department, but the smaller agency does. And so it's not that one is better than the other or does more or less than the other. It's just you have different responsibilities, different skill sets almost. And that's why I tell people too, if you get into dispatch and you really liked dispatching, call taking, but like the agency wasn't a good fit, I mean, honestly, go to another one, because they are just different enough personality wise, culture wise, responsibility.
So true. Mm-hmm.
You might still find a really good fit in dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all short, so we'll take you.
Yeah, we will. 1,000%. You got some training under your belt? Yeah, we'll take you for sure.
Right.
I definitely had a newfound like sense of respect for the smaller agencies, because at my big agency, I was dealing with a shooting a shift, honestly, and that's just in my sector. There was probably another shooting in another sector, like these big priority calls were constant. Right. I don't get that often at my new place, but I'm doing all this other work that's requires just a different skill set that I didn't have to tap into out there. And when big stuff happens in my new agency, I'm prepared because I took so many of those types of calls and dispatched those at my old agency. But now I have to, when those incidents happen, I have to work that with only one other partner. So we're balancing radio, multiple 911 lines ringing, while doing all that other side work that needs to get done. It's just a different type of busy, a different thrill, a different adrenaline rush. I have nothing but respect for the smaller agencies out there.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was blindsided.
I like that. It's just a different type of thrill.
It is. It's different. Like
it is. Both agencies I worked in are smaller. But for like a type A perfectionist, independent woman, don't need no partner. Hey. It works really well for me. I'm in control. And that's something I had to learn. I can work in a team and it's fine, but it takes me a little bit of okay, we can let them we don't have to do everything.
We've been assigned a group project. I have to relinquish a little bit.
It's a little tough if you're like me. But yeah, it is. It's just a different set. I mean, people who answer 911s for 12 hours, bless you. You are my heroes. Right? I could not do that because and it's a different skill set. It's a different, no, thank you.
I need that shift. I need that.
Yeah.
I need that shift.
You're saints because couldn't do it.
Well, tell us a bit about the dispatch lab and that whole project business that you have as well.
So just one Tuesday, I decided to start a business. No, I mean, actually, it's not much more complicated.
Actually, it was a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday.
Actually, Wednesday afternoon. No, I just 4 or 5 years ago now, I got more into training. Felt like I was always looking for training resources and couldn't find what I need, or couldn't find things that maybe were free or a little more cost effective versus bringing in training classes, which is beneficial as well. And so I was well, I'll just create some. So it's kind of where it started. And then so 2-ish years ago, I launched the Dispatch Lab as kind of my thing, just because I nerd out about training. And so developed some online courses that I had there previously, just resources, just a really way, I just felt like there was kind of a gap as far as, especially when it comes to training, the dispatcher. So almost train the trainer type stuff. And so that's where I kind of felt like I could step in and maybe create some bridges there for people and provide stuff and collect things from other people, because there's no sense of recreating the wheel, to help out other people. And so I did that. And now it's more of just kind of a side thing again, since I have my full-time job, but still like a place for training resources and everything's still stored there and sharing stuff on Facebook and that type of thing. So yeah, it was really just kind of seeing a need and being like, why not? Let me see kind of if I can help serve people, if I can provide some value, if I can help people not be as lost as I felt like I was at one time. And it's worked out really well and it's been received really well. And people have, I think, benefited from it. They tell me sometimes that so I just, I believe them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of that, like just deciding that there was the need and why not try to fill it.
It's true because when I started, we have to do training X amount of hours every year, to stay valid,
Right.
whatever the proper terminology is. Yeah, continuing ed and all that good stuff. But I did in the beginning when I started to look into that stuff. A lot of stuff wasn't really dispatcher specific, or the courses were few, or they kind of lump you into those officer courses where the de-escalation, and it's just different. We're dealing with two different sides of the situation. So more people like yourself who are putting out these dispatch specific resources, I think there's a lot of value in that, because it's like, I'm a dispatcher, I'm not an officer, or I'm a dispatcher, I'm not a firefighter, like whatever the thing is. Like, we want things that are specific to what we're dealing with, and not just kind of cookie cutter trying to force us into something that's really not our jam. So I think these are really good resources.
Yeah, and there's stuff to learn from attending those trainings, like, learning more about their side. But yeah, that was one thing that I saw, that I would meet people and they'd be like, oh yeah, they just sent us to this training because we needed training and the officers were going. And it's not that you can't learn from it, but like you said, it's not completely focused. Like, it's not as many takeaways because it's not focused on dispatch. And we are, there's differences than fire, than law, than that kind of thing. And we need more training. There's not, especially coming on board with the foundation, like there's still many states who have no minimum training standards.
Yeah.
As we work for reclassification, it is tough sometimes to show a strong picture of why we need reclassification if there's not minimum training standards, if there's not a schedule that everyone's held to. So it's super important, and the job is always changing, always evolving, and we can't ever just like stop training. Like, there will never be a time where you can just go through your basic training and then be like, okay, I'm good. I don't need to continue doing anything ever again.
Just with technology alone. I mean, the way we're moving and advancing 911 tech, you have to be willing to adapt. And I think that's something that's hard for folks who have been doing it for a long time without the technology. And now we're moving into this technology forward 911. And there's a potential to have a big gap there and a hard transition. And being willing to relearn your job is important because it's going to change. I mean, just in my 5 years, text to 911 has been implemented and is bigger and more evolved and is integrated in other programs. And, and that's just in my 5 year span. So I can't imagine someone who's been doing it 20 years and all the tech that's been implemented from, then to now. You just got to be willing to adapt.
Yeah, it's so much. Like, I read a lot and interact like on stuff that is kind of made for the corporate training space, like for corporations and big businesses. And I think one of the things that we've kind of done maybe unintentionally is we've kind of, again, like siloed ourselves, but they're making so many like strides in that mainstream as far as training and learning and development and instructional design. And so that's kind of one of my passions. And why I started doing more is to kind of bring that over. So that way we have the up-to-date stuff and we have more personalized learning, because society as a whole is shifting more from this one size fits all approach to individualized learning and diversity and inclusion, and for those with, different needs, and making sure we're addressing all of that in our training and that sort of thing. So it's really to me, it's a really fascinating topic because there's just so much stuff that hasn't even kind of been touched on sometimes, like different ways to present information and programs and that other resources kind of outside of dispatch. So that's also like what makes it exciting for me, is because I can find all these different things and programs and pass them along to people. And so it's kind of fun to be able to be like, oh, we'll try this program. And in one of the classes that I teach at conferences, talking about like next generation 911 is more than the technology. There's the personnel side of it. And part of that is training. And we have to do more individualized training, but we also have to work on development of people in the industry, because you can't, like, there's not enough positions to just always promote people. So we have to find other ways to help people grow and develop so they'll stay in the industry, without kind of, the old school, like, and then you promote and then you promote, like that's how you move up.
Yeah.
So that's, and that's another thing that I could just like about all the time.
No, it's true. I mean, even just like when we talk about the whole industry, like emergency response, police, like finding different ways to be inclusive, be transparent, using social media. Our departments are entering an era where they're having to be on social media, and they're having to find ways to connect to community and, really build those platforms with each other. And all that technology and stuff is also feeding into dispatch. I mean, I think I read an article where there was a program that a dispatch center used where they'd send a text link to the person's phone, and then it opened like a video feed of what they're seeing.
That's the new upcoming thing.
Yeah, like that. And I know there are dispatchers out there like freaking out about it. Like, I don't want them to see me. I don't want to see them. Like, but yeah, that is kind of coming in. That's coming. It's coming, like there might be a standard or that is set for to be a normal thing, that you FaceTime 911, and that'll be a whole new adjustment. So just understanding that this technology, for how dispatches ran, 911's operated, and how we train, like it all needs to rise with it, with these changes.
Yeah, there's just so much, and it kind of feels like sometimes we just kind of get like more and more, but nobody ever takes anything away.
Yeah.
But that's why too, as these technologies come in, I kind of like challenge people in the centers, then don't be afraid to vocalize even to vendors how these products can be more efficient, or like how your center uses it that makes it even more efficient than maybe just kind of a standard use, or those kind of things, if that makes sense. Like, because you're the ones on the front line. So as technology changes, as trainings come out, don't be afraid to like give feedback and like be gentle. Some of us like hard on this stuff. But don't be afraid to let people know it's going to meet your needs, because in a lot of ways, anybody who offers training like the foundation or the vendors who offer things, they are to an extent there to serve you and to meet a need. So if you have input, like, don't be afraid to give it either, especially when it's asked for it, because you know better than anybody. You're the one every day that's using it. So it's got to be kind of a two-way conversation. I think sometimes in dispatch, we just become disgruntled dispatchers, and we're just like, the world sucks, technology sucks, and I hate everything. But we have to speak up for ourselves and advocate for ourselves respectfully. But nothing changes if nothing changes. So
exactly,
we can't just kind of sit there and hope that it gets better.
We're all a part of creating the culture in our centers. We can either make it a miserable 12-hour shift, or we can do what we can to make it a pleasant one. So
yes,
I think we all got to own that a bit.
For sure.
So to sum it up, what advice would you give aspiring dispatchers out there? What is something, it's a little gem you would provide them?
So I'm reading a book. I read a lot of them. But I love what they say about feedback. And I had shared it on my Facebook page. And the author talks about how, like feedback and Serena Williams, and feedback is a big part of training. So if you're aspiring, not scaring you, but letting you know when you come into the job, you're going to get a lot of feedback. But he talks about how Serena Williams, like arguably the greatest tennis player ever, literally pays people to tell her what she's doing wrong or what she can improve on or areas that she might try things differently. And so if feedback and constructive criticism is good enough for Serena Williams, it's good enough for the rest of us. So remembering that we need feedback, it's important. It's 100% human to be defensive when we get feedback. That's just our natural reaction. But even the worst feedback can hold some truth to it. And it's such an important part of this job. It's the only way we're going to get better because there is just so much to it. So if feedback is good enough for Serena Williams and she pays people for it, free feedback is good.
That's awesome. That is so true. Serena's getting it. I'll take it.
Yep.
How can people find you, connect with you, reach out to you, all that good stuff?
All the ways. So they can always shoot me an email, Halcyon, HALCYON, at deniseamberlee.org. There's the Facebook page for Denise Amber Lee. There's the Facebook page for the Dispatch Lab. Denise Amber Lee Foundation is also on Instagram. I am on Instagram. I'm trying to think. Those are pretty much the main ones. I'll be honest, Facebook is probably how you're going to get me. I'm back checking other stuff. So definitely check out Facebook. The Dispatch Lab is where I kind of just pass along training resources specifically. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff, that's a good page just to watch, because that's usually like when I find a good book or a link to it or anything like that. That's where I pass it along. And then the Denise Amber Lee page is where we post about all of our courses and offerings and that kind of stuff. And if I can do like a shameless self-promotion,
please.
We're launching a new course in August. So we're recording this on the 6th, and we're going to announce what that course is tomorrow on the 7th. So probably by 2 weeks out, that'll be public, but that course will launch August. I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to include all that information in the links and all that in there. So don't feel like you guys need to write that down real quick. It'll be there as well.
She'll write my name out because
well, definitely gonna write that out. But by the time this airs, that course will be live. So I'll include that link to the new course as well. And we'll get everyone all that information and hopefully get some folks linked with the foundation and Dispatch Lab and all the great stuff you guys got going on over there.
Yeah, it's a fun time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it so much. Ever since I started dabbling into the dispatch world socially, I've seen your face. So I do appreciate fangirling. I'm fangirling.
Usual.
I do really appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking the time to jump on today.
Thank you.
All right. I'll be right back with you. All right, everybody. That was another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me and our channel, The Raspy Dispatcher. Thank you so much, Halcyon, for jumping on with us today. The Denise Amber Lee Foundation and the Dispatch Lab, all awesome resources for dispatchers and departments to really look into to help improve, our skills for this tough job. If you're interested in joining me on Let's Talk Dispatch, definitely check the link in the bio. TheRaspyDispatcher.com has a Let's Talk Dispatch page, so you can jump on, pick a time that works for you, and we can have a nice, easy chat about everything dispatch. Of course, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, all that good stuff. Until next time, stay raspy, everybody.